All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to this first forecast. Well, actually, it's not my first forecast. I've been making forecasts and keeping them private on YouTube for over a year now. I think I counted like over 300 forecasts that I've done in the past year. But this is the first one that I'm going to be posting publicly, so I'm really excited, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it. So this forecast specifically is going to be a weekly forecast for the upcoming week. So starting tomorrow on May 25th, 2026. All right. So let's start by looking at the economic calendar for the week to come. So right here, we can see that tomorrow we have actually a lot of bank holidays, including a US dollar bank holiday. But I think the markets are still going to remain open, even though we have a bunch of bank holidays. The markets are going to remain open, but that might lead to some, big consolidations on the market. So tomorrow, I think I might stay on the sidelines, just see what the markets are doing and then wait for later during the week to um, to get into the action. Because usually when there's bank holidays, it translates into low volatility and not a lot of setups and a lot of consolidation. And then after that, if we look at Tuesday, on Tuesday we do have some Australian dollar news, which is CPI. We have some New Zealand dollar news. Then Wednesday we don't have anything interesting. Only two orange folders, which are not great in terms of like impact. And then Thursday, we have some USD news, so PCE, and Friday, some GBP news and some Canadian dollar news. So overall, in terms of economic news, the upcoming week is not too great. I have to be honest, I've seen better, economic calendars than that. Um, yeah, this upcoming week could be low volatility and a consolidation overall. But it doesn't entirely rely on the economic calendar. But the only thing I'm trying to say here is that we might have some consolidations because we just don't have a lot of economic news coming out this week. But again, it's about seeing what the market is doing and then reacting. Okay? So yeah, but for tomorrow, um, I would take a step back. I would stay on the sidelines just because we have a bunch of bank holidays and then start trading and actually being involved in the markets on Tuesday. All right, guys. So let's start by the dollar. So we're here on the weekly time frame on the dollar. And so last week was just a massive consolidation, and we created this weekly fair value gap. Okay, here. And so right now we have this swing high, which is last week's high, as a first target. And then eventually after that, we also have this target that's all the way up here. So I think that a retracement inside that weekly fair value gap is the most likely thing uh, for price to do when the market opens tonight. I think price should be retracing inside this weekly fair value gap to then continue higher. But overall, for the week, my bias on the dollar is still long. I still see higher prices for the upcoming week. But we might start the week going lower until we reach that weekly fair value gap, and then we can continue higher from it. So on the daily time frame, there's really nothing interesting here. In all honesty, you can see that the past like 6 days, literally the past week, has been just a massive consolidation. Price just stayed in the same area and didn't really move anywhere. So yeah, I think the highest probability thing for price to do right now is to retrace inside this weekly fair value gap to then continue higher. So I'm putting an alert here on that weekly fair value gap. Once we get the alert, that means there is something interesting. But before we reach that weekly fair value gap, I wouldn't do anything. I would just wait. Okay. So let's take a look at the Forex majors quickly. Let's see which majors have that weekly fair value gap. So on AU right here, you can see that we don't have that weekly fair value gap. So that to me just makes it low probability to start with because it doesn't look like the dollar. Okay. So that's just not interesting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. And you'll notice in my forecasts, if I find that something is not interesting, I just don't overcomplicate it. I just don't look at it for like 5 minutes. I just look at it a few seconds. If it doesn't look good, I just move on to the next one. Okay. So right here on GU, we actually have a bearish weekly fair value gap. Okay. So we could continue lower from from that weekly fair value gap, just like the dollar itself. So I put an alert here. And then if we look on the daily time frame, yeah, I think just a retracement inside this weekly fair value gap to then continue lower. So I think that short term on GU, we're going to continue higher, and then medium to long term, we're going to reach this lower target down here. So yeah, GU could potentially be interesting this week, only once we get the retracement back inside this weekly fair value gap. So I'm gonna put it on the interest list and we'll see how it develops. Um, Now moving on to EU, I think EU has, yeah, okay, so on EU, we actually have a quarterly fair value gap down here, but that's not really relevant for day trading. What matters right now in EU is that it's a tiny one, but it's there. We have a bearish weekly fair value gap, just like on GU. And so I'm going to put an alert on this one too. And I think we can continue lower from that weekly fair value gap until we reach that quarterly fair value gap down here. Um, and then as a first target, well, the target that we should be reaching is the previous week's low right here. Okay. So basically, it's a little bit like, well, it's the same thing as GU. So short term, I think we're going to see higher prices, and then medium to long term, we're going to see lower prices on EU. So that's not too bad either. It's going to go on the interest list. Um, New Zealand dollar, US dollar, that's not too great in my opinion. Yes, I can see, you know, bearish on this, and the first target would be this opposing weekly fair value gap, which is a bullish fair value gap. But the problem is that we didn't create that weekly fair value gap like we did on the dollar. So to me, that's just not as good as the other pairs that actually have that weekly fair value gap. The way I know, and that's really important to understand, and the way I know which major is the highest probability major is the major that looks the most like the dollar itself. Because the dollar moves all the majors, right? So if one major looks a lot like the dollar, then this one is the highest probability. Okay? So NU, not interesting. USD Canadian. Okay, so this one we did create that weekly fair value gap here, but it's a breakaway gap, and I honestly think where we closed last week, we closed right up here. I just don't see a retracement happening all the way back inside this weekly fair value gap. So if we look at the daily, yeah, it's honestly this entire move higher on USD Canadian is that's what I call a consolidating trend. We haven't created a single daily fair value gap in that entire move higher. Well, the only one we created was like down here at the beginning of the move. So that's just not interesting to me at the moment. But overall, I think we can reach We can definitely reach this target. And yeah, we'll have to see if we get some context here. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about context, I strongly recommend you go check out Ario's content on YouTube, um, and you'll understand what context is. But right now, we don't have any context on USD Canadian, and so I would prefer to, just take a step back and wait for price to clear up a little bit. Okay, now USD CHF doesn't make a lot of sense because it's supposed to be moving higher because of the correlations. Um, yeah, I just don't like that. I'm not gonna overcomplicate it. It just looks ugly. Looks very ugly. And finally, we have USD JPY, which honestly looks good. This looks a lot, well, not a lot, but it looks like the dollar. So we have that weekly bullish fair value gap, which we can definitely retrace back into to then reach this high, which would be the first, oops, sorry, which would be the first target. Then eventually we have this high also, which is a monthly high, I believe. Um, so yeah, here USD JPY might be one of my favorite ones. It's definitely going on the interest list, that's for sure. And I'm going to be waiting for this alert to get triggered. And then once we get that alert, um, I think we can get some interesting moves to the upside here on USD JPY. So that's it for the majors. There's three on the interest list so far, but obviously that can change throughout the week depending on how the market moves. All right. So now moving on to gold. So gold, we're gonna remove some stuff on this chart. It's a little bit messy. This. Okay, so on gold, I would say at a first glance like this, I would say short. I think this week is going to have lower prices here on gold. Now, from the weekly perspective, the next target is all the way down here, around like $4,100 down here. But that's way too far. Like, there's no way we can reach that in a single week, especially a week that doesn't have a lot of economic news coming out. So we can look on the daily. Um, okay, so on the daily, we had last week we had this daily fair value gap, which we had a sting into and we went lower from it. But now it seems like we're reversing, we're starting to go higher a little bit. So this fair value gap, this daily fair value gap has been used, but what remains is the rejection high of that fair value gap. Okay. So I think that we could potentially sweep this rejection high here on gold to continue lower, and then the next target would be this low down here. So basically what I'm saying is I think we're going to start going higher to start the week, and that we could sweep this rejection high, so just a liquidity sweep like this, to then reach lower towards the end of the week. I think that's the main move we're going to be seeing this week on gold. But I don't expect huge volatility. I don't expect huge moves. I think we're just mainly gonna stay in this area right here. All right, so that's it for gold. Let me check on the 4 hour if there's something. There's really nothing interesting here. Okay, well, yes, that's it for gold. That's what I see happening for this week. Can take a look at silver quickly. So silver is definitely bearish, especially after this candle. So we can definitely continue lower towards this swing low. So that kind of confirms my bias and my idea on gold, because gold and silver kind of like always move together. Um, well, recently it wasn't like that. Like if you go back like 5 years ago, but since like I would say like a year ago, gold and silver are really starting to move exactly the same way, or with, very minor differences, but they overall move in the same direction. Um, so here on the daily time frame, it's a similar scenario that we have on gold, where last week we had this daily fair value gap, we had a sting into it, we pushed lower from it, and now we're starting to come back higher. So that to me means that we can again sweep the rejection high that is left from this daily fair value gap and then continue higher. So liquidity sweep right here and then continue lower on silver. Because my and that's really important to know if you want to understand like how I get to this conclusion is that on both, well, on metals, especially gold and silver, I have a short long-term bias. I think I think that like the huge surge in the price of gold and silver that we saw recently made it overvalued, and I think there needs to be some kind of a correction on gold and silver, both of them. So long term, I think that the metals are going to keep going lower. I might be wrong, and honestly, if I'm wrong, I would love to have other perspectives on that. That is just my opinion. But if you have a different perspective on what the metals are going to do in on a more like long-term basis, I would love to know. Please share your opinion. But yeah, overall, my long-term bias on the metals is short. I think we're going to see some lower prices, like on silver. I think we're going to go down to at least like $60 an ounce. So yeah. All right, well, that's it for silver overall. I would say short term, we're going to see higher prices, and then long term, we're going to see lower prices. Okay, then let's take a look at crude oil. Sorry, this chart is messy. Um, on the weekly time frame. So the weekly time frame doesn't really tell us anything. It's really hard to read this price action. But then from the daily perspective, there's something I like a lot. Um, I'm gonna remove this Fibonacci here. It's a bit confusing, but on Wednesday right here, well actually on Thursday, we had the opportunity to create this bearish daily fair value gap, but we took away that possibility on Thursday. We did not create that bearish fair value gap. And so the failure to create a bearish fair value gap is a bullish argument in itself, right? Because if price fails to create a bearish PDRA, then it means that price is mostly bullish. Okay, that's how I see it. And so the failure to create this bearish fair value gap, and then the candle we got on Friday right here, this wick at the bottom, um, sweeping this low, and then also this low, and then closing above these two lows. I think to me, I see bullish here on crude oil. And also something that I like to use once in a while is the Fibonacci. I don't know if you guys use it. To me, it's like a magic tool especially on like assets. To me, it doesn't work on Forex, um, on like currency markets, but I think it works very well on commodities and like stocks, for example. I know a lot of traders use Fibonacci to analyze stocks, but I love using Fibonacci once in a while, especially like on things like gold or crude oil, because I find that the zero point 0.5 level always gets respected. Like we always get the retracement back around like in this area right here, and then after that we move higher from there. It's just a pattern that I've noticed with my experience, and so once in a while I do use Fibonacci to confirm my opinions. So yeah, overall, I think we can continue higher this week on oil. Um, I think this is not over, right? The conflict in Iran and everything that's going on is not even close to being over, and I think we're still going to see some much higher oil prices for the months to come, for months, at least until we reach this target all the way up here, which is it's a monthly target. It's basically the high of 2022 when the Ukraine war started. Okay, and so Yeah, I think definitely crude oil is going to go back up to like 130 a barrel. Not this week, obviously, but in the upcoming months. All right, so that's it for crude oil. Overall, I see higher prices, but again, we've been in somewhat of a consolidation on Thursday and Friday last week. You can see that we don't have the cleanest price action right here. And so, yeah, in my opinion, tomorrow should also be a consolidation here. But overall, for the rest of the upcoming week, I think we're going to see some higher prices. Right, moving on to Bitcoin. So, whoa, okay, Bitcoin on Saturday, I didn't see that, but on Saturday it went all the way back down to 74K, which is crazy. Let's take a look at the weekly. So Bitcoin hasn't closed yet. There's still 6 hours to go on this weekly tick candle, but yeah, we could create. It's very tiny, honestly. Let's not consider it, but this technically is a weekly fair value gap right here. But that's way too tiny for me. Um, Overall, I don't like price action here on Bitcoin. I think it's really doing random things that I don't expect it to do. So I think I'm just gonna wait because right now, in all honesty, I can't reach a clear bias. If I had to force an idea, I would say short for tomorrow at least, and for the remainder of the week, I would say definitely short until we reach like, do we have a clear target? Well, yeah, I guess this could be a target, and then even further target would be this weekly fair value gap. Um, but yeah, that's just me trying to force an idea, and we all know that. Well, I don't think we all know, but I just want to mention that it's really important. When you force an idea in trading, it usually means you're wrong. Okay, so forcing an idea right here, I would say short, but to me, it's just a consolidation for now, and I would want to just wait for like Monday or Tuesday, wait for price to clear up, and then we can have a better opinion on what Bitcoin wants to do. All right, and now let's take a look at the indices. I'm mainly just going to look at the S&P and Nasdaq, see what's going on. So yeah, I think this week we're going to see some new all-time highs again. I think it's going to be a bullish market this week. If we look on the from the weekly time frame perspective, we had a sting on the S&P right here. We had a sting inside this weekly fair value gap, and we delivered higher, but we still haven't reached the context high, which is this target up here. So yeah, I think that's the next thing we're gonna reach. So if you're a futures trader, and you're trading tomorrow, I would say definitely try to catch along at least until we reach this target. But once we reach that target, there's either two things we can do. We can just sweep it to continue lower, or we can just run through it, just disrespect it and start moving even higher and reaching some new all-time highs right here on the indices. But yeah, I would say I think we're gonna see another bullish week here on the indices on the stock market. And honestly, same thing here for Nasdaq. Exact same scenario with a little some minor differences, but overall same scenario here on Nasdaq. So yeah, that's it for the US indices. And so I'm not going to be looking at the European or Asian indices right now, but if it's something that you're interested in and you want me to take a look at, again, just want to remind you, it would be a pleasure. Just let me know which market you want me to take a look at, and I definitely will take a look at them. Okay? And finally, let's take a look at all the Forex crosses. Okay, but this is gonna go fast. I have a very like I go fast because the crosses are not as good as like Forex majors, so you can tell very quickly if it's interesting or not just by looking at a few seconds of price. You can tell if it's good or not. So Canadian JPY here. Mm, no, that's not too great. I don't like it. CHF JPY right here. We have this target. This weekly fair value gap is failing from the two candle rejection. Again, if you don't know what two candle rejection is, strongly recommend you go check out Ario's content. He explains it very well. And so the two candle rejection is failing here, and it does seem like we want to continue higher. And so I would like to see if we can create if we can have a third candle consolidation here on Monday, create that daily fair value gap to push higher. But for now, it's just not interesting. Um, GBP JPY, no, that's just not great. I don't like what I'm seeing here. This area is such a big consolidation zone. I don't like it. Euro JPY. Okay, so over here, the two candle rejection, we could argue that it's holding. So this weekly fair value gap is holding and could potentially push price lower, but it doesn't really make sense because other JPY pairs are mostly bullish. And also, like if you look on the daily time frame, this area right here, this is massive consolidation. So yeah, the JPY pairs this week, they don't look too good. Like this is massive consolidation, and then this is even worse. Okay, well, that's it for the JPY pairs. I just don't like them this week. I think there's a lot of consolidation. So just take a step back. Take a step back. And and the crosses, anyways, that honestly, like you will get nice setups on the crosses like once a month. Okay, it doesn't happen every day, every week. Okay. CHF pairs. So what is happening here? Okay. Well, it does seem like we want to continue lower this week on the CHF pairs. I just don't like because we don't have a clear target, first of all. I don't have a clear target to aim for that's lower. Yeah, okay, we could argue like all these swing lows to the left could be potential targets for price, but to me it's just not too clear. It's not too great. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's take a look at all the others. Okay, so this is a little bit better. Yeah, Canadian dollar CHF yeah, Canadian CHF. That could be interesting here. Or we had a weekly fair value gap, which we respected, and now we're moving lower from. We have this target all the way down here, but we also have some closer targets like this swing low, this weekly swing low, sorry. So Canadian dollar CHF, I would like to see if on Monday we can create a consolidation daily candle, create that daily fair value gap. Once we have that fair value gap, we can sting back into it to continue lower. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. It's gonna go on the interest list for sure. Okay, Euro CHF also looks not too bad. The first target is that weekly fair value gap right here, that bullish opposing PDRA. Um, so again, I think Monday could potentially consolidate. We could even have the first thing inside this weekly fair value gap right here. Um, so just consolidation, creating a daily fair value gap to then again sting into it and continue lower. That's not too bad either. Let's see if we can create that daily fair value gap. BPCHF. Yeah, we can again definitely continue lower. This is the next target on the weekly, and then on the daily, we have this target right here. So it's not as good as Euro CHF or Canadian dollar CHF because we actually have resistance on the way there. Well, resistance. We have well, an opposing PDRA going against us. If we want to go short, then we have this bullish fair value gap to worry about. So honestly, if I'm going to trade a CHF pair this week, I wouldn't try to overcomplicate GBP CHF. I would just look at these two right here that are honestly more interesting. And then finally, New Zealand dollar CHF. So again, this is clearly bearish. There is no doubt about that. We're going lower here. Um, we have a couple daily targets to reach. And so I would like to see again if on Monday we can create a daily fair value gap, a bearish daily fair value gap here, to then continue lower from it. Yeah, that's also good. Okay, so CHF pairs not too bad this week. Let's look at the Canadian pairs. So Canadian, mm, this is not great. Yeah, no, I don't really like this. I don't really like this. Euro Canadian going higher, I think. Yeah, I think we definitely want to head higher. It's just that we don't really have any context, and just price action is not that clean here. So, no, this is not interesting right now. GBP Canadian, no, I don't like this. And then New Zealand dollar, Canadian dollar. Yeah, this is not interesting. Okay, so all the Canadian dollar pairs for this week, I would say just don't don't look at them, don't trade them. To me, it doesn't look really high probability this week. Well, not as good as the CHF pairs, for example. Okay, let's move on to Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar. I just want to see where we're at. It's been a while since I've looked at this chart. Okay, so it's actually very strong. We're definitely heading higher. But since we've reached this target right here, seems like we're consolidating around this level. Seems like price doesn't really know where it wants to go. And also, we did create a monthly fair value gap down here that we could, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see a retracement back inside that monthly fair value gap to then have a real move higher, but that might take a while. On the weekly, it's mostly consolidation for the past like month. And then on the daily, it's not great either. So I would say wait on Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar. Let's just wait and see and wait for price to just get out of this consolidation zone. And then we're going to have a better idea of what it wants to do. Okay, moving on to Euro, New Zealand dollar. That's oof, that's not too great. No, that's not nice. Okay, GBP, New Zealand dollar. Move this. Mm, Okay, that's actually not too bad. We actually have some monthly context. Well, at least until we reach this high, we have this monthly target that's a little bit higher. So we had that monthly fair value gap, which right now it does seem like we are respecting it, which is great. Now on the weekly, it's not too clear on the weekly, and it's not too clear on the daily, but I do like the monthly context. I think this high is definitely going to get reached next. I think overall throughout the week we can continue higher at least until we reach that high. So right now, it's not too clear, but I do like the setup here on GBP New Zealand dollar. And then moving on to Euro Australian dollar. Um, okay. No, I don't like this too much. It's not clear to me. Mm, When I start overthinking a chart like this, it probably means that it's not good. That's what I always tell myself. And then GBP Australian dollar right here. It's very similar actually. It's literally the same thing as the previous chart we just looked at. Yeah. No, I don't like these. Okay. Well, that's it. That's it for the crosses. We have four of them that are on the interest list, so we'll take a look at them every single day of the week and see how it develops. All right. Well, thank you for listening. This was my first publicly available forecast. It's a weekly forecast, so I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope that also, if you disagree with some of my market expectations, that you can uh, share this disagreement, of course, in a very respectful way. And I would love to hear your opinions and your ideas and your own forecast, maybe. But overall, that's how I see the market. That's how I work. I think that gives you a good idea. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow in the next daily forecast. Thank you for listening.